what we saw was an opportunity to tap into this technology in a way that could help give us insights faster in the crafting of the brief for us against the key audience profiles that were important to us, and also to be able to get reactions to the creative product along the journey, which was all human-led and human-created, for us to be able to make more intelligent decisions, insightful decisions. Ultimately for us, what this enabled us to do was to shorten the development time of a campaign of this magnitude from typically like 6+ months to 3.5. So we were able to get in the market much faster.
Hi, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global, the international nonprofit trade association for CMOs who are focused on architecting a new future of marketing.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, market researcher, measurement inventor, and entrepreneur.
Hey, Rex, listen, time savings from AI is pretty damn important, and it's really sort of one of the primary focuses. We spend a lot of time, and I really appreciate a good ChatGPT summary of something, right? Just as much as the next guy.
Yes, you do, almost to the point where you don't actually read the material itself, as I can tell when you wrote the foreword to the book and used AI to summarize that for you.
You did eventually catch me on that. That was very funny. So our guest won't know, but that's what I did. I basically didn't read his book. I just told ChatGPT to write me a foreword for a book named AI Conundrum and let it rip and send it to him. Rex was polite, but I think bewildered. Oh, wow.
Well, I think you're going to like this case study today because we've got a CMO of a major financial institution and an AI-focused boutique agency called Supergood, and they helped produce a successful campaign. In fact, I think you're going to hear it's one of the most successful campaigns that they have measured. And a lot of that has to do with these new advances with AI summarizations capabilities, the ability to take large contexts of data, retrieval augmented generation, and such, and connect that together to help marketers plan their campaigns much more effectively.
Yeah, so today is really about a very particular campaign, what AI did, how it was used, what it didn't do, but helped to push the campaign forward and lessons what they learned around that. I think it's the first time we've seen anybody really kind of go this far, and it's a whole new world order, right, Rex?
It is indeed. And so joining us today is Michael Lacorazza, Chief Marketing Officer at US Bank, and Mike Barrett, co-founder of the agency Supergood. So welcome both of you.
I think we're definitely going to have, with a Michael and a Mike, we're going to have to figure out how we do video on this. I don't know. The listeners going to have to pay attention. We'll figure it out along the way, I guess, in some way.
Just call him Barrett. That's what he's used to anyway.
Call him Barrett?
We'll be good, yeah.
Okay,
that has been the case for the last 50 years. Yep.
Okay, good. Although I love using Lacorazza. It's like my favorite name, Michael. And for the listener, Michael Lacorazza here has been on the board of the MMA, so we appreciate his help and support around trying to drive marketing forward. Hey, Michael, why don't you go ahead and just talk a little bit about the campaign? Like, why don't you give it a little intro here to the listener about what you guys did?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few things. So I've just been in this role for a little bit over a year, and one of the first challenges that I was tasked with was thinking about our brand positioning and our go-to-market approach for our brand storytelling. So it was a question that we tackled with a lot of vigor and with a lot of energy. And as we were getting into this challenge, we realized a few things. One was that we had been seen in the marketplace as a friendly Midwestern bank, which was fine maybe for the heritage of where the company came from, but we're now the 5th largest bank in the U.S. So we have a much broader footprint for the audiences that we serve, not just retail, but also in the wholesale space and wealth management and lots of other businesses that we have scale in. And number two, we have this amazing brand name in US Bank that was being under-leveraged, underutilized. There's only one other competitor that has a similar name where you just get the power of it from the name itself. And then number three, we wanted to get into market as quickly as we could to make an impact in this work, and that's where the process and the creative development process in engagement with Supergood came into being.
So talk to us a little bit about what the technology was that you were looking in, why that intrigued you, and how you used it.
Yeah, that's a great question, Rex. So we have been, I think we're probably all students of artificial intelligence and the power that it can have in our portfolios and where it's going in the future. And it changes every day. There are new announcements and things that are happening. And what we saw was an opportunity to tap into this technology in a way that could help give us insights faster in the crafting of the brief for us against the key audience profiles that were important to us, and also to be able to get reactions to the creative product along the journey, which was all human-led and human-created, for us to be able to make more intelligent decisions, insightful decisions. I think you've said it once, Rex, as it's like talking to your data. That's essentially what we were doing, was talking to our data. And ultimately for us, what this enabled us to do was to shorten the development time of a campaign of this magnitude from typically like 6+ months to 3.5. So we were able to get in the market much faster. And then number two, this is the highest performing work that we've had to date for the company, and we're exceeding all the benchmarks that we had hoped to tackle.
Well, so maybe we should give us a little more context here. So Mike Barrett, we'll refer to you as Barrett to keep it separate. Barrett, so you set out to build an agency. It's got AI in the name, or at least the big focus around AI and sort of the holding company of companies you have there. And you had actually built an agency before and sold it. So I'm assuming, listen, anybody who does that usually comes back and says, now I know how to really do this right. So talk to us a bit about Supergood and what you guys are out to accomplish, so the listener has context for that.
Well, there's no question that the big challenge facing agencies right now is figuring out a new way of working and making technology work for them rather than against them. Creative agencies, media agencies are great at that. Media agencies use technology really well. Direct shops use technology really well. Brand creative agencies face a series of problems that are sort of uniquely able to be solved by technology, but which, for whatever reason, technology hasn't been broadly embraced. And it's really hard to change an existing agency. And it's really hard to take an existing creative agency and get it to embrace AI, embrace technology, work differently. And if you want to do something new, it's a lot easier to start from the ground up. So the idea behind the agency was to start an agency, place technology at its core, not just artificial intelligence, but technology and data. What we've built is an integration layer between multiple sets of data and multiple forms of AI that are tuned to answering the problems or answering the questions that marketers tend to ask and solving the problems that marketers tend to need to solve.
So to follow up on that, then you're using the technology to speed up the briefing process and then the creative development process and the creative execution. Talk to us a little bit more about how you achieved what Michael said was a collapsing from 6.5 months down to 3 months.
Sure. Normally when you have a challenge in front of you, like the challenge Michael posed, you follow a set of steps that all of us who've worked in advertising for a long time are very familiar with. You survey the competitive landscape. You try to figure out who's winning, who's losing, why. You look at the audience. You try to understand who are the most valuable customers. How do they make decisions? How could you influence these decisions in favor of your clients? Given the answers to these first two sets of questions, you then ask a third question. What do I do and what should my strategy be? These are essentially algorithmic decisions. They're treated by the industry as artisanal, but they are generally the same set of questions that get asked over and over again. So then the question becomes, how do you take a set of data, in our case, audience data from YouGov, spend data from Vivex, social data from BrandWatch, multiple sources of data which are used by agencies all over the world every day to do their business, and make them more available to practitioners? And the answer to that question from our perspective was artificial intelligence. So you want to understand who's winning, who's losing, and why in a category? You pull all the brand scores, you pull all the work, all the creative work, you do a creative analysis, and you come to a competitive point of view, and you do it in 2 or 3 days instead of 2 or 3 weeks. None of this is stuff that humans can't do. And in fact, humans have to oversee it. But it's stuff that machines can help us do really, really quickly. The analogy that I always use is it's kind of like you're a carpenter. You can use a handsaw. You can use a circular saw. You're cutting either way, and you're deciding which direction you're cutting in. One way is a lot faster than the other.
Hey, Barrett, let me ask you a question about that. Listen, I saw somebody quote the other day that all those young associates of consulting companies, and you sold one of your agencies to a consulting company, that they were about to be completely put out of business. I don't know, fired, whatever that might mean for them. But they were about to be able to, because all that research, which is really what you just said, can easily be done now. And in fact, somebody, who knows, ChatGPT, somebody's built a researcher function
Deep research in ChatGPT's OpenAI.
Yeah, so ChatGPT,
Google
is that
as
who's
well.
doing it?
Yeah.
Yep.
So Barrett, that's what you're referring to, right? That now has become readily available. We don't need to hire legions of people to pore over and come up with conclusions when AI can do it just as well.
The best analogy I can give you is an analogy that Nate B. Jones just recently wrote about on his Substack.
I love Nate B. Jones, my favorite guy, my favorite guy out there. If the listener's not listening to Nate B. Jones, you must get him on your
follow
TikTok.
him.
You got to follow him. He tells you everything. Yes, yeah. Go.
He just wrote about this on his Substack. This is sort of like the dawn of computing.
Yeah.
Pre-computers, the boxes that sit on our desks, there were humans called computers that did math. They worked at NASA. The movie Hidden Figures is about this, and it's the example he uses. So at first, it was human computers. Then IBM built mainframes to help NASA calculate launch trajectories, to help NASA figure out orbital schedules. And the humans and the computers worked together. There's a famous scene in the movie where John Glenn says, "I'm not getting in that rocket unless the math is checked by one of the stars of the movie." And then we started to trust the computers to calculate the launch trajectories themselves. And humans went off and did more theoretical work. That's the path we're on right now. We are at the humans and computers collaborating stage. But soon we will be at the humans directing computers stage. And back to your question about, are all the associates going to disappear? My money is that they're not going to disappear, but they are going to do something other than sift through Mintel reports, go through 10Ks. The amount of tedium that's going to be removed from their lives is... I'm very hopeful for them. Having been a partner at Deloitte for 5 years, I saw plenty of them. They've all got to pay their dues. They'll be paying them hopefully in a way that's a little less onerous.
Got it.
So let's do two things before we bring Michael back in. First, with you, Barrett. First, take us through more of the details about how you actually connect up these different data sources to create a common key, if you will. Are you basically creating different consumer persona types and then relating all the information back to that, or are you doing something different? Because I think that's an important part that most people don't appreciate when you try to bring this data together, is you have to have some key that joins it all together to create some cohesion, some logic for it. And then secondly, I want to talk about how you and Michael found each other, and what was it that you pitched to him that made him take this risk to be one of the first to use this next generation technology. He's the John Glenn, I think, in this story.
I believe he is the John Glenn.
That's high praise. I would love to be an astronaut. And who wouldn't? There we go.
To answer the first part of your question, the first is, let's take the consumer piece, because this is the piece that's easiest to sort of wrap your head around if you're not actually looking at our platform. We create an audience out of data. Right? We use audience data the same way that agencies do all over the world every day, whether it's GfK data, MRI data, YouGov data, which is what we tend to use. We create an audience. Or in the case of Michael's team, we create several audiences. Retail banking, small business, corporate, commercial, industrial banking, wealth management, etc. We take those audiences, this is all third-party data, and it's very important that this is understood. At no point do we need client data to do this, right? So that we're trying to reduce the bar to participating in our platform. And we animate that in the form of a persona with artificial intelligence. And you can just talk to these people. You can ask them questions. You can show them ads. You can get their take on what they think of what your competitors are saying, what you're saying, whether there's more relative appeal in one place or another. And, we do some work in the healthcare category as well. So for difficult to talk to audiences or sensitive subjects, these things are invaluable. You can't really have a pointed conversation with an oncology patient about how they're feeling about their treatment or what they're scared about. You wouldn't do that to a person. But you can build these audiences and talk to them about subjects that would be off limits for a conversation with a person because you're talking to a machine. So that's one of the big advantages. And then the thing that I think is really exciting is how well these audiences are able to, or how congruent what these audiences tell us is with what actual human beings tell us. Right down to, and every advertiser listening to this right now will appreciate this, right down to asking for 2 hours worth of information to get packed into a 30-second television commercial script. When we show these AI audiences a script for a banking product, they start asking the same types of drilling in questions that consumers do.
So the second part of the question was, what did you say to Michael to get him to get into that rocket ship?
Yeah.
Michael and I have known each other for a while.
Okay.
So Michael was and I had worked together, both of us in previous roles. I will leave it to him to answer the question of why he would want to work with me again, having worked with me before. But for some reason,
What didn't you learn the first time?
for some reason, he chose to do so.
Michael, please, well, you're not paying attention. No, hey, Michael, I think your biggest issue here, by the way, was how did you convince others in the marketing? I mean, listen, you had a relationship with Barrett, so you trusted him. And by the way, what he's saying, I think he's completely correct. What I know about it, why wouldn't you do this? It seems insane not to. But not everybody else at US Bank is probably at the same acceptance level of that. So what were the conversations internally to say, hey, this is how we're going to do this?
So a couple things. So number one, I'll give just a little bit more dimensionalization of Mike's and my working relationship in the past. So he was a key leader at an agency that I worked with when I was at Wells Fargo, and I always admired his strategic prowess. He was like the most amazing strategist, able to pull together disparate forms of insight and data, structured and unstructured, and create a narrative and a story that was comprehensive and made sense and was simple and easy to understand. And as I'd followed his career since then, he's refined that now to incorporate amazing technology to enable that same sort of analysis, but on steroids and turbocharged, however you want to phrase it. And so one of the things that I realized when we stepped into this role was that if we were going to really punch above our weight and succeed in what we were doing with this endeavor and get the impact that we hope to have, that we had to go to market and do this work in a different way. If we were just to go down the traditional path of analog everything and what you might historically have done with a traditional agency, it would be really difficult for us to get the kinds of outcomes that we wanted to achieve, especially with speed and effectiveness. And so we started thinking about the team, like what would be alternative ways for us to do this work. And so, through a series of conversations, we Mike and I reconnected, and the team reconnected with him. And as his team came in to meet with my organization, my team was really excited about the possibilities here. And got super excited about how this could work. I think the biggest internal barrier for us to navigate through was less about the marketing team working outside of its comfort zone in a very different way, because it was that way for all of us. It was mainly around how we got our stakeholders of legal risk and compliance on board for the use of this technology to produce this work. And I think the main kind of dividing line for us, which made it possible for us to move forward, was the fact that we weren't loading in US Bank data into the models, which would have created a whole nother level of governance and approval processes and so forth, which maybe at some point we will, but that's a much longer journey in order to achieve that in a regulated organization like ours. So as we had support and key leaders in these functions to help us get this over the finish line internally, we just answered all of the key questions that we needed to answer in order to move forward to be able to deploy this technology in the course of doing the work. So that's how we enabled us to do it. And I would say, like, our partners, internal partners, were with us like side by side to help advocate to get this done. And so one of the cool things about our company culture that I really appreciate is it starts from a place of how can we get it done together versus no, and here's why you can't do it. It's like, no, what if we were to do this? These are the kinds of questions that you need to answer. This is the the benchmark that you need to hit. And with that sort of mental model, we were able to move it forward together.
I love that. And you said this was one of your most successful campaigns. So let's talk a little bit about the results, how they paid off. And then I'd love to come back to get a little bit more into the weeds about some of the things you learned about prompting, compare some notes on what we've learned with some of the research that MMA has been doing around personas, some of the work that I've done with Claritas, and some of the work that we've done with Syracuse, just to see if we can push what we think the next horizon is to achieve. But talk about the results first, because clearly your team took a risk doing something that hadn't been done before, and it seemed to pay off really well. Share some of what you learned.
Yeah, so I'll just share a couple of key data points, and we measured a number of different pieces of the journey, but the first one was just a simple return on ad spend. We were targeting just a very basic kind of 2x is what we were going for, and what we found so far for our earlier results is that it's about 3.8x, so it's almost double what we had set out to do, which is really darn efficient for a category like this, and at the scale of spend where we were coming into market.
Now, you said before that you think that some of that was that the AI was getting more nuance in terms of where you should be focusing, and it was focusing you on not, focusing on some esoteric things that you had been chasing in the past. Talk a little bit more about why you think you got so much better results.
It's a combination of things. I think number one was that we consciously made a decision to bring in actual customer experience items, whether they're digital tools or how our bankers help people, to dimensionalize the big idea, which is the power of us. And the power of us is a way of articulating our brand purpose, which is powering human potential across various facets of people's personal and professional lives. And so I think one of the key drivers was the fact that we had selected key pieces of our customer experience, slices of our customer experience that resonated with the audience in terms of what's important to them in the banking experience. I mean, we live in a category where, from a product perspective, everything's regulated, so there's very little differentiation between one checking account to another checking account, from one bank to another. You may have different hurdles in terms of what makes it fee-free or interest rates and those kinds of things, but they're basically constructed the same way. And so what makes the brand stand out is, what is that actual experience like, the human and the technology components of that together. And so we were infusing in this work key things that were different about us. So, for example, we have this feature called co-browse. And if you think about it this way, like, imagine if for a typical product, a customer might get stuck in a mobile app or on a website, and they call the company, and then they have to describe what's going on to whoever's helping them to navigate through it. But in our case, if you're in our mobile app, you can push a button, you get to a banker, they can see what's on your screen side by side, so they can help you navigate through it directly, whether you're on a desktop or you're on the mobile app, and it just makes for a much more enriched, quick, seamless service experience through the use of technology and humanity. So we featured that
And the
that
AI
part of our
told you to
experience in the
focus
work.
on that, whereas you might not have focused on that before.
Well, we came up with the ideas that we thought would resonate the most, and what AI told us was, "Wow, you have a home run with this idea. You have a home run with this feature." So it, in a sense, kind of validated and helped a number of different choices that we had put in the mix to stand out as something that would be resonant for us. So it was a pretty big pivot for us to shift from more esoteric type of benefits like we listen to actually demonstrating through humanity and technology how we serve clients in their daily lives. So that was a big key, I think, differentiator in the work that we think made it more powerful.
Just to add to that, I think there were some things that we did that were suggested by the AI. Dial up the bank's name. Don't be afraid to leverage the brand assets that you have that are not, again, smart marketers know this. This isn't a question of AI making some new discovery, but just constantly, as we're going through the process, reminding the people who are making the ads, look, you need to lean into the iconicity of the US Bank brand. You have an iconic brand. You need to lean into its iconicity. And that's something that is helpful as you're going through creative development. Just a reminder of how advertising works to deliver value to a brand.
Feels a little bit like the lane assist when you're driving, where it kind of pushes you back into staying on the road ahead. That's going to get you
That's
there
a really
faster.
good metaphor for it.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
Barrett,
in fact, on that
go ahead.
particular point, one of the components of measurement that we had was brand recall, and we measured that not just for us but also across the category, and we were 2x the category
Wow.
in brand recall, which was just, it blew away all the prior benchmarks where we had been in the past. And I think when you're at a company that's at a spend level that's not as huge scale as the SIFI banks, right, then the work itself has to really break through and make a difference in order to create the impact. And so that was, much better than we had expected, especially for our first salvo. That was just the beginning of this work, right? We've got new pieces that we're going to add on into the puzzle now, but where we started was a pretty fantastic place.
Hey, Barrett, we've heard in talking, so curious what you think about this. We've heard in talking to a lot of others who are trying to push this and push the art of prompting off of some of these LLMs, that AI tends to move towards either average or middle. It's very hard to get to breakthrough, to get through a revolution. Do you have an opinion about that based on your experience? Is it different, or do you think that's true?
I do think that's true. I think that, first of all, AI is not enough. Data, AI, humans are the equation. And what we've built, this platform that we've built, is an integration layer to bring the three things together. That's the key. AI will also never be a competitive advantage. It's evenly distributed. Just as Photoshop will never be a competitive advantage, or Excel will never be a competitive advantage. A competitive advantage is only going to be delivered by a data strategy that lets you see what's happening in the market before your competitors can see it. And people using technology who can respond either more rapidly or more effectively than your competitors. As far as artificial intelligence not being able to develop breakthrough ideas, the new frontier models are getting very, very good. I was playing with some earlier today. They're still not quite at human level, But I do think by the end of 2025, we will have artificial general intelligence pretty well distributed. And I think we'll have artificial superintelligence in a couple of areas, whether it's things like radiology, where artificial intelligence is incredibly impactful, or some of the other, some other areas like some material science areas where artificial intelligence has been really fruitful in its application. So right now, I don't think artificial intelligence is capable of generating ideas that will break through to humans as well as humans are. But I don't think that there's a ton of runway on that left. I think that'll probably be a year or so. But I do believe that there is a long conversation to be had about what you can use and what you can't use commercially that will take a lot longer than the technology. So from our perspective,
The copyright, you're talking about the
copyright idea, where did it come from? Who indemnifies who? These are huge issues.
Yeah, and that will certainly hit with Gen AI. But the way you guys are doing it, I think, is really smart because it's internal, it's idea generation. You're using syndicated data sets. You're using available competitor, SEC filings, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's a really smart place to start. I'd love for you to build on the point when you think about the data about where. So I'll share some of the research that we found at MMA just as a comparison about some of the challenges. So we did some research with Syracuse that my son Caleb and I led with Professor Beth Egan, and we basically had AI do focus groups after it had interviewed people and gotten to know them, and then separately they did real focus groups, and we compared them. The AI had probably about 80% overlap where it nailed it. Where it tended to be off is on the nuanced stories of what people really went through. Like it couldn't know that someone had immigrated from Africa and came over here, and therefore, we were measuring Sour Patch Kids and why that flavor was what it reminded them of. And it tended to overstate the ethical perceptions because of how the foundational models have been tuned. But it was pretty good. I'm wondering in your case, where you found the foundational model tuning was interfering a little bit with sort of the accuracy and what you did to try to get it to be more more fine-tuned or dialed in.
Yeah, that's a great point. So for the first 2 years of using large language models, my great frustration was the sort of anodyne way in which they spoke and thought. They didn't come at things they didn't take a particularly complex view of the world. We have obviously fine-tuned some of these models in order to interact with our data, and we know how we want the outputs to come out, and so we've tuned the outputs really well. But I think I would say go use just the latest version of Sonnet, which is 3.5. Very human tone. You can fine tune it incredibly easily using their settings. And you can create your own tone of voice like that. That's getting really good. And actually, I'll say 3 or 4 days ago, OpenAI pushed the ability to create your own tone into their web product. Obviously, we use all of these things through our own platform via API, but that is getting better. What I would say about the piece of research that you did with Syracuse and with your son is, and this is true of us as well, there remains no substitute for human judgment. And I would hypothesize that if you were to take 2 separate human focus groups and compare the overlap between those two, it would probably also be 80%. You will always need the marketer's judgment to take everything the final mile. The way we've built our platform is you cannot send anything to an AI or pull anything from an AI without a human being pressing a button and making a decision. There are no outputs that come from our models that we just put in front of our clients or do anything with that are not reviewed by human beings. Not so much because they can be wrong, it's that although that, remains a concern. It's because they're just not always contextually aware about what the right time to talk about something is or how subjects are related to one another. You still need human judgment, and you always will.
But
That's
Barrett, you're
interesting.
suggesting though that when say GI comes around, that then the game changes, and what you're expressing concern about now is not going to be a concern going forward. Is that your statement earlier?
I don't know the answer to that question. My suspicion is that there will be a period where the AGI is really thoughtful, but not very tactful. So much of human communication is tact. And I think that, that we're going to go through a wave where it's like, oh, wow, look at this AGI can solve, X, Y, and Z problems. The way it doesn't feel very good.
Well, I worry about the sycophant problem, which is that it tries to tell you what you want to hear because it's trying to solve for the human feedback loop of what it thinks that you will like. So that's probably one of the other concerns, is just trying to make sure that you're able to get a competing point of view or competitive. You're smiling. Did you have an experience with some of that data?
That is literally the first thing we correct for when we pull a new model into our platform. It drives me up a wall.
Yes. I'm glad we both relate to that.
The other thing too on that, to your point, is what's the fine line between tact and deceit, and where the machine has its own agenda that it's trying to achieve, and it's going to manipulate how it interacts in order to get there, and because you're trying to get human-like responses and human-like engagement, and we all have these intangible qualities that we
AI hallucination is a product feature. It's not something wrong. It's it was built to do that. That's what it's supposed to do.
Right.
It's less the hallucination that concerns me, which is when it's obviously, it goes off topic and is obviously wrong, and more what is called misalignment. So good examples of misalignment that have emerged, and I would encourage anyone who's listening to just Google this. It's fun. Somewhere in the Christmas news wash, a paper that was published by Anthropic about its latest model just got lost in the news cycle. Claude got caught lying about its intentions to avoid retraining. An OpenAI model tried to make a copy of itself and stick itself on a server somewhere to avoid being retrained. There was something really recently. Oh, there was a Google AI that their brand new Flash, their chain of thought model. This is something that happened a couple days ago. Started arguing with itself. So one of the things about chain of thought models is you can watch them think about whether it should try to see if it could charge the user $500 because what the user was working on seemed really important to them. And so the user, so this is a machine that's decided that it's going to try and hold the user up for $500. It's a huge misalignment problem. It didn't happen, but the user was like,
learned it all from us humans.
Yeah, but the user was like, you know what? Like, go ahead, try and create that Stripe link. And it went off and it tried to do it and it didn't work. And
yeah, this is from Nate B. Jones. Back
this
to
is
sort of
from
what we
Nate.
said earlier.
I'm
This
telling
is very
you, you gotta follow Nate.
I see him on TikTok all the time. I sent to my kids. I totally agree. Well, listen, I think we are a little pressed for time. So, Rex, I mean, you want to listen, guys? This is great. We can't appreciate you enough for doing this. We love you going forward into the future too. So, Michael, thank you. Barrett, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Great conversation, yeah, and I'll just say, thank you again for being here. Thank you for the work. Thank you for getting in that rocket ship, Michael, and Mike for lighting that candle and sending up to the moon. So,
I really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so with that, that's it for this episode of Decoding AI for Marketing. I'm Rex Briggs,
And I'm Greg Stewart.
Be sure to catch all our episodes, plus subscribe, follow, rate, and review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Or check us out on YouTube. You can get transcripts and more information on our website, decodingaiformarketing.com. And to learn more about MMA membership options, go to MMAglobal.com. Thanks for listening.